Hey guys, and welcome back to the Boundary Riders Podcast. We are now up to episode 22, I believe, so we're getting up there now. We're really pushing towards the end of the season, and what a massive round it was. We saw so many upsets. We saw Carlton beat Collingwood, we saw Fremantle beat Geelong in Geelong, we saw the Giants conquer the Bulldogs after being down by 29 points, seeing the Gold Coast win the Q Clash, the Crows win the Showdown, so many big upsets throughout the weekend, and we also saw, this is just a few moments ago for me, because I'm recording this on a Sunday, the West Coast Eagles somehow recorded a win. I know it was against the team that was only just above them in North Melbourne, but I thought that North Melbourne were a step above West Coast, but apparently not. But nonetheless, we had a big weekend as well, and the first thing I wanted to cover before we get into the review of round 19 is the Umpire Dissent rule is back, because no one saw this coming, because no one was told that the Umpire Dissent rule was coming. I don't think it was shown very much throughout the rest of the weekend other than Friday night. And for some reason, the umpires pulled out a stupid interpretation of it, that if you point at the scoreboard and tell the umpire to look at the scoreboard in not really too much of a demonstrative manner, you can get 50 metres for it. And we saw it twice on Friday night. One was Nathan Murphy, and I can't remember who the other one was. It was a Carlton player, I believe. It was so a while ago now. But just ridiculous. Unbelievably ridiculous. I think there should be an umpire dissent rule in the game, but I think they are not consistent on it, and they don't tell people what you can and cannot do. Like, they tell you one week you can't throw your arms out, then you can throw your arms out and it's okay. They overcorrect themselves, and it's just ridiculous. And to ask the umpire to look at the screen, it used to be in my thought that when a player used to say look at the screen, the umpire would just say, I'm not looking at the screen, mate, I've already paid the decision. And that was all that would happen. I don't think that Nathan Murphy really made a huge deal about it. And I can't believe that was paid, because clearly he didn't know that was going to happen. And that no club was told before the weekend that umpire dissent was going to be looked at again all of a sudden. After it started earlier in the season a little bit, but then it hasn't reared its head much throughout the rest of the season, and suddenly now round 20 was the time they'd bring it up. I just think that is so stupid. And of course the umpires should be respected. I mean, I'm saying that as someone, if you're playing the game, just respect the umpires. But on the other hand, it's like, fuck them. Anyway, the umpires had no friends as kids. No, let's be honest. I mean, I was told as a kid maybe I should be an umpire because I know the rules very well, but then I realised that I have a couple of friends and whatever, so I didn't want to be bullied and yelled at. But nonetheless, look, respect the umpires if you're playing local footy or whatever, but if it's AFL and you're watching the game, go at it. I don't really care. As long as you're not being too bad, I don't really give a fuck. But nonetheless, umpire dissent, stupid rule. Like, the way it's being interpreted and the way it was on Friday night was ridiculous. And it really put a scar on the game, because I thought the game was really good. Collingwood versus Carlton. We saw Carlton win that game. And before we get into the review of round 19, I've got a new segment for you guys, which we'll get into right now.
Oh, cheers, mate, for that. And I appreciate you giving me a new segment. But my first ever Up Yours has to go to the umpiring department on Friday night. What the fuck is this dissent rule talking about when Nathan Murphy just pointed at the scoreboard and got paid 50 metres? Now, granted, I think they would have got the goal anyway, but what the fuck is that decision? How the fuck is pointing at a scoreboard dissent? The AFL need to seriously look at themselves, because that is bullshit and just put a scar on that great game of footy. Shit umpiring, and that's my Up Yours for this week.
Alrighty guys, so I hope you enjoyed the new segment on the podcast, but now we'll get into the review of round 19. And like I said a moment ago, it was a massive round, a lot of upsets, every single game, I think bar one on Saturday, and Friday was actually a upset. I think the Giants may have gone in favourite against the Bulldogs, but I still think that was underdogs. And really, I think there was only one or two games this weekend that were the favourites won. I think St Kilda and Melbourne, and even St Kilda, I don't think they were exactly favourites to win against Hawthorn. I think it was a pretty 50-50 game. So, massive round. It's really good to see, and it's really made the ladder now really close. If we quickly take a look at the ladder, we have Collingwood now is 2 games clear. That's pretty well fair. The top 4 now, though, between Port Adelaide, Brisbane and Melbourne is really tight. There's only 4 points between them, and Port Adelaide have a pretty poor percentage. So Melbourne and Brisbane can easily jump them, and Port Adelaide have a pretty tough couple of games now. They've got Geelong and GWS in the next couple of games, so that's massive for them. Then we've got the Saints sitting in 5th, Giants in 6th, Carlton 7th, and the Bulldogs clinging to 8th spot by 2 points on so many teams coming up now. Geelong, Sydney, Richmond are only 2 points out of the 8. And the Bulldogs have a pretty tough run home, so that will be interesting what happens there. The Crows are clinging by the skin of their teeth at this stage. I don't know if they'll make it, but they do have a pretty easy run home. They do have West Coast left, and they got the Gold Coast next week, so it'll be very interesting how they go. Essendon and the Gold Coast, I think they're pretty far gone now. They're only 1 game out of the 8, however, the percentage is pretty poor, so I just don't know if they'll make it, and then that's pretty much the only teams that can make it now. Freo are pretty much shot, and obviously Hawthorn, North Melbourne, and West Coast, I don't think are making it. But we'll get into the first game of the round, which of course was Collingwood versus Carlton. Massive game from Carlton. Last week I said that Carlton are going to go into this game and get a touch-up, I thought they were going to have a real touch-up, but I'm starting to believe in Carlton, which is a bit shocking considering 7 weeks ago where they were, but they beat up on a couple of teams that they needed to beat up, and suddenly Charlie Curnow has stood up when he really needed to. Like, by himself, no Harry Mackay, he kicked 6 goals, he was massive. Collingwood, it looks like they can, it shows that they can be beaten if you do keep up the pressure and you take advantage of Darcy Moore not playing very well on his key opponent. Obviously a better defender for intercepts and stuff, but he just got found out on Friday night against Charlie Curnow, especially in that last quarter. A couple of free kicks given away. They may have not been there, but nonetheless, Charlie got in the right position and he was massive in the end. We'll go to the votes now. 3, 2, 1. We have Charlie Curnow with the 3 votes. He was awesome. Nick Newman with the 2 votes and the 1 vote to Jacob Wiedering. He has definitely stood up in the past in the last month and a half, Jacob Wiedering. He's been brilliant in the back half for Carlton, and he's always been a really good defender. But I think probably at the start of the year for that midway period, he probably wasn't at his best, but he's definitely stood up in the past 6 or 7 weeks. And if they can continue this, Carlton, because we did see them choke towards the end of last season, I don't think that will be the case, knock on wood. But I think that they are finals bound now because they've got a pretty good run home, and I think it will be very interesting the last 4 weeks. I think it's going to be massive. Collingwood, I don't see too much of an issue here. I think they'll still be able to. I think they've obviously got locked up top spot by now. They've locked up top 2, so I don't think they have to worry about too much. But it does show a little bit of concern that, they can't win games by very much. So we saw in the finals last year, they lost 2 of their finals by under a goal. So they're not exactly unbeatable when the games get close, and in finals, it's going to be interesting if they can stand up to it. But at this stage, I still think Collingwood are the premiership favourites by far. Next up, we get to Fremantle versus Geelong, and Fremantle, they're such a weird team this season. I don't know what's happened to Freo. They had a shocking start to the season, then they had a weird mid-period where they just looked like winning every single game. They beat Melbourne, they beat Sydney, they beat a couple of other teams around them. But then they just dropped off again, and everyone thought that, Freo are just having the bad year. They just won't make finals, and they'll probably just peter away into the sunset. But all of a sudden, they go down to Kardinia Park and have somehow beaten Geelong. And I think I said this last week, that Geelong, they'll make finals because, they have a couple of games at home, and they'll pretty much make it now. And I still think they will, because they have the Bulldogs, St Kilda, Collingwood, and Port Adelaide. That's the opposite order. Just turn that around. That's their last 4 games. They do have Port and the Western Bulldogs at Geelong, so I'm still banking on them winning them. But they also have Collingwood and the Saints, and I just don't know where the Saints are. I still think they're kind of free-falling, but it's going to be interesting if Geelong make finals at this point, because they're not playing good footy. And now Tom Hawkins is injured with a calf. So he could be out for a couple more weeks. And Jeremy Cameron, he kicked 1 goal 5. He's not really in the form that he was at the start of the season. So I don't know with Geelong. It's going to be very interesting. I still think they'll make it, but that's a very poor loss, no matter what it looks like. You shouldn't be losing at home to Fremantle, considering how poor they've been a lot this season. And Chris Scott's got some words to talk to his main, to his experienced players, because there were a lot of defensive efforts in that last quarter where I think that they just thought they were going to roll over them, but they just didn't. They didn't roll over them at all. And by the way, I think I've kept on calling this round 19, but this is round 20, the review, so I'm not fixing it. Deal with it. Sorry, I just realised that. Moron. Anyway, next game we get to the... 3, 2, 1 votes for Fremantle Geelong. Sorry, I'm everywhere today. I've had a tough day. Anyway, 3, 2, 1 votes. 3 votes to Alex Pearce, 2 votes to Andrew Brayshaw, and the 1 vote to Luke Ryan. Pearce did have a couple of questions asked of him throughout this week, maybe through the last couple of weeks, about his captaincy. I still think he's a very good defender, and in this game he was massive, especially in that last quarter and those final moments. Just was not beaten in the one-on-ones, and he was just insane. One of the best defenders in the comp. I think Freo's best line is their defence, so it was a little bit difficult for him, obviously, earlier on in his career. He had a lot of injuries, but now that he's getting a good, clean run at it, it does show how the quality of Alex Pearce, Andrew Brayshaw just backs it up every week. He's been probably Freo's best throughout the year, if it's not Caleb Sarong. And Luke Ryan, he's probably up there in their top 5 for their best in Ferris as well. He's been brilliant off halfback, as he always does. So not really too much to speak of with the votes there. I think that was pretty well obvious, in my opinion. But after that, we get to the Bulldogs versus the Giants, and the Bulldogs have cost another opportunity. I don't know if they make finals now. They got an awkward run home. I thought they'd beat the Giants down in Ballarat, and look, at half-time or close to the third quarter, they had a 29-point lead, and they just couldn't shut them away, and the Giants now win 7 in a row. Adam Kingsley's just got them humming along nicely, and I don't know if they'll do damage this year in finals, because I don't know if they've got the forward line to stand up, but, I mean, if Toby Green's on the way that he's been going lately, they could do anything, the Giants. They're really good to watch. They've got the Swans next week, which is a massive game for both clubs. Giants don't have the easiest run home, but I do think they'll make finals now. They just look so good in form, and they were just massive. And we'll get to the votes now. Toby Green got the 3 votes, 2 votes to Tim English, and the 1 vote to Sam Taylor. Toby Green, I think, is the best player in the comp right now for... I think definitely one of the best... I think he's the best forward in the comp right now. And if you need someone to get your team over the line, I think he's probably the best. Up there with Marcus Bontempelli this year. These guys have just been dragging their teams home in a lot of games. So he's been massive, and I think he's getting up there in the leaderboard for the Riders medal at the end of the year, which I've talked about a few times. Tim English is massive in the ruck. He'll get All-Australian pretty well sewn up. He nearly got him over the line, but Kieran Briggs did stand up in the last quarter, but Tim English was very good. And then we had Sam Taylor, who I think, even though he missed a fair chunk of the season, it's pretty hard to deny him not making the All-Australian at this point. He has been massive for the Giants, and I think he is the best key defender in the comp at the moment. I know I was talking about Jacob Wiedering a minute ago, even Alex Pearce, but he has been massive this year for the Giants when he's been in. And I think also that Jack Buckley has been immense this year as well, especially when Sam Taylor went out. He was out of this team even when the Giants got on that big run, and Jack Buckley and him are going to be a lethal combination as the top 2 defenders in the years to come for the Giants. They can build a whole team around that defence, and yeah, they're going to be big, the Giants. I think in the next couple of years, they could be pushing for maybe an inaugural premiership, in my opinion. They have been massive. Next up, we get to the Suns versus the Lions, and big game for the Suns. They finally broke the Q Clash drought. I think it's been 9 games now where they haven't been able to win it. But they backed it up finally, and I don't know, Brisbane are a bit iffy. They just a bit iffy this season. I don't know what's with the Brisbane Lions. They seem like they're a team that's just going to push, and they look like they could do something this year. But then they just have these weird games where they look so off that you just can't trust them enough. And they did that again. Maybe it's because Lachie Neale got shut down so well, and I'll quickly just mention the votes now. 3, 2, 1. Took Miller got the 3. Ben King got the 2. Noah Anderson got the 1. Now, I know Ben King kicked, I think, 5 or 6 goals, but I gave it to Took Miller because his role on Lachie Neale, I think, arguably won the game. Lachie Neale got tagged, had 17 I think he definitely had under 20 touches, had no influence on the game. Took Miller, I think he's probably one of the best captains in the comp. He was sorely missed throughout the middle part of this season, Took Miller. Obviously, was massive last year. And I think whoever takes over this coaching role, if it's Dimmer Harwick or if it's not, I think they've got a list to push for finals next year and possibly do some damage because they've got a great set of midfielders. They've got a really, really good defence, and their forward line is also pretty good if it functions correctly. So yeah, the Suns are on, and they could do big things. And obviously Noah Anderson was massive as well. So all 3 of them, big votes. I still think Brisbane will, I think they can actually make the top 2 because Port Adelaide have kind of fallen in the last month. So we'll see how that goes. But at this stage, Brisbane are in a bit of trouble, and the Gold Coast keep their slim finals hopes alive. Next up, we get to Saturday night, and the game that probably wasn't going to be the most talked about by a lot of people actually turned out to be a massive game. Bombers versus Sydney. Sydney had this game well won about halfway through in the third quarter, second quarter. They had a 37-point lead at one stage. But then they kind of stopped, and Essendon nearly ran over them. They did everything they could, the Bombers, to take over the Swans, but Tom Papley late in the last quarter kicked a ceiling goal, massive goal. They almost gave it up again when they gave Jai Menzies a free kick in the pocket and had 6 seconds to get there. If with the umpire indicated a little bit quicker, it may have been a little bit different. I don't think they would have scored, but it could have been a little bit more tense for the Swans. But nonetheless, the 3 votes I gave to Zach Merritt, 2 votes to Kyle Langford, and the 1 vote to Errol Goulden. Now, I know the Swans I know the Swans won this game, and some people may say because they won, Errol Goulden probably should have got maybe 2 votes, if not 3. But one, Zach Merritt was, I think, the only player in the first half that played really, really well for the Bombers. I think he kept them in it, along with Kyle Langford. Langford kicked 5 goals in the end. He was massive, and I've said this a few times. He is a very underrated player, Kyle Langford. He's kicked over 40 goals this year, which I actually didn't know until the game. But he's been massive for them up forward. Peter Wright as well. He kicked 4 goals on the weekend, but he also lost them the game. The amount of drop marks that guy did in the last quarter was bloody terrible, and it's just not good enough from Peter Wright. He's supposed to be there as a big, tall forward to take those pack marks and take those clutch marks late in games, and he just gloved so many of them and just dropped them on the ground. Even in the first half, when he had a chance to take a chest mark to give him a little bit of hope going into half time, he just dropped it. It was like easy chest mark and he dropped it on the ground. So Peter Wright's got to back it up next week. I think they've got the Eagles who got a win, but I don't think that's going to last. I think they'll get pretty well smashed next week, the Eagles. But yeah, the Bombers, who, I mean, they've been in the 8 for the majority of the year, may well have just cost themselves a final spot. And I don't know. I mean, I didn't exactly expect the Bombers to make the finals this year at the start of the year, but now I think it would be a pretty big disappointment to the fans to see the Bombers do so well this year for a lot of it, to then capitulate in the last 6 weeks. I think that'd be terrible for the Bombers. But at this stage, I don't know if they'll make it. It'll be very interesting. I think we'll have to have a couple of results go their way, but at this stage, Sydney did very well, and I still don't think the Swans will make it. I'm sorry to the other Swans fans out there like me, but I just don't think they'll make it. I think a couple of the games that they've lost this year, you know, we lost to the Giants earlier in the year, we lost to Port Adelaide by a goal earlier in the year, and we got that draw against Geelong. If we bank one of those wins, I think we probably make it, but yeah, I think that draw against Geelong was probably the biggest one. I think that's probably going to cost us because our percentage is very good, but that draw was just not good enough, and I think that may cost the Swans in the end. Next up, though, we get to the showdown, and my God, the Crows, they can play well at home, but away, I still don't trust them. But they did it at home again. Port Adelaide, they've kind of sunk into a big hole now. They have lost 3 in a row. They've got Geelong and the Giants in the next 2 weeks. One of the teams where they haven't beaten Geelong down in Canadian Park since 2007. And we also have Canadian Park 2007. And then the Giants, you know, that'll be a big game for them as well. Port have to win at least one of those next two games to, you know, hold that top 2 spot. I think almost they have to win their next 4 games to hold that top 2 spot. And I think they need to probably get that home final. Because if they don't, I don't know if they'll win away from home in Brisbane. And I don't know if they'll beat Collingwood at the MCG at all. We saw earlier in the year, it's a very long time ago now, but they didn't look good at the MCG. And they haven't really looked that good there when they've played there this year. So I'll be very interested to see how Port Adelaide go from here. But the Crows were very good. Taylor Walker kicked 7 goals. Really good game from him. He finally stood up in a big game. I don't know if the Crows really... To be honest, I don't know if the Crows should keep him on the list. Maybe for 1 more year, but if he wants more than that, I don't know. It just feels like they can't develop these key forwards if he stays along. I think that's the same with Buddy Franklin and the Swans. I think they will grow a lot more without Taylor Walker there taking the spotlight and kicking all the goals. But, I mean, he's the only one there at the moment who's playing consistent footy. And, I mean, he's number 2 in the Coleman, so it's not like I would say definitely retire him, obviously. But, you know, at this stage, I don't know if the Crows can, like, build a forward line without him getting there. But I also don't know if they can do it with him either. That may be very confusing to some of you, but anyway. For the votes in the showdown, again, the 3 votes to Taylor Walker, of course, with the 7 goals. Jordan Dawson got the 2, and Rory Laird got the 1. But yeah, like I said, Port Adelaide have really got to bank these next 4 games, because if they don't, I think they'll miss the top 2 spot. And without a home final, especially against Brisbane, if Brisbane or Collingwood get that home final, I think Port Adelaide may well be in trouble in the semi-final. So, and I mean, if they go up against the Crows in the semi-final, the Crows have shown that they're way better than them in showdowns recently because their tall forwards for the Crows just overpower Port Adelaide's defence. And by the way, I don't know how the hell the doctor let Aliir come back on the field. I think they said that Lachie Jones had a migraine. Oh, I don't know about that. I mean, he's a doctor. He's 25 years experience. I'm not saying I don't know. I don't want to say anything out of hand, but that look for the game did not look good at all, in my opinion. So I'm very surprised that he came back on. And to be honest, he didn't do that well when he came back on either. So I don't know if he had a little bit of shell shock as well, getting that head knock. But yeah, it didn't look good for Aliir. And Lachie Jones as well. After that, we get a Sunday, and we saw St Kilda really in that first quarter when they kicked 9 goals to 3. The game was basically buried there. Hawthorn did make a way back, and I think we're only down by 11 points at three-quarter time, but St Kilda just ran away with it. Brisbane, we also saw Sam Mitchell just go off at his team, and I actually didn't mind it. I thought that actually showed like a little bit of passion from him. It showed that, he wants to get this team a lot higher than, I think they were probably expected to maybe even win this game. It definitely was 50-50, and if it wasn't for that first quarter, I think they very well could have had a chance, but they wasted their opportunities, and they wasted that big opportunity to get a win late in the season, and the Saints lived to see another day. For the moment, I don't know. I still think they're in a bit of free fall. The only team they've beaten in, I think, the last 8 weeks is 3 of the bottom 3 teams. So it'll be interesting how they go for the rest of the last month. They still need to win some more games to make the finals. But it would be interesting if they did make it, because, for all the talk of them missing the finals, Ross Lyon saying that they're not ready for it almost, it'd be interesting to see what happens with them. But we get to the votes now. Brad Crouch got the 3 votes, Luke Bruce with the 2, and Dan Butler with the 1. Brad Crouch with about 30-odd touches, 3 goals as well from a midfielder was massive. He was good. I think he's been very good for the Saints this year. Probably one of their best, if not, honestly, probably the best with Rowan Marshall consistently throughout the year, as well as Jack Sinclair. But they've been brilliant. He's been brilliant this year, Brad Crouch, and I think a little bit when he came last year, he wasn't that consistent. So it's good to see him playing some consistent footy for the Saints, and I think over the next couple of years, he could definitely build himself into a really good midfielder, especially if he starts kicking some goals, because a lot of the Saints midfield don't really get on the scoreboard as well, like especially those inside bits. If they can start kicking some goals, maybe even 20 goals in the next season, they definitely push themselves up higher in the ladder. Luke Bruce with the 6 goals, got the 2 votes. I mean, it's hard to get rid of him, isn't it? I mean, he is still kicking heaps of goals for the Hawks, and I just don't know if they have that firepower up there to build a forward line without him. Like, it'd be interesting how many more years he goes on. I think he'll go on for 1 more year maybe, but yeah, this rate, I think the Hawks are going to have to find someone to find some goals, because I don't think Chad Wingard's going to get any. And the young forwards of Hawthorn, I think Mitch Lewis obviously, and I just don't know about the rest of them. It's going to be very interesting how the Hawks can build that forward line, especially if Luke Bruce retires in the next couple of years. And Dan Butler with the 4 goals was brilliant, highest goal scorer for the Saints. But after that, we get to Sunday afternoon, Richmond versus Melbourne. And it looked like maybe in three-quarter time that Richmond could just win this game, could maybe pull this one off. They were even in front at one stage by about 20 points. But then they just let Melbourne get back into it. And led by their captain in Max Gawn, they were massive. And they finally found a way to go. And, I mean, they kicked 6 goals to Harrison Petty, 4 goals to Van Rooyen, and 4 goals to Jake Milksham. Maybe they do finally have a forward structure that will work. In saying that, though, Richmond have not really been the best defence for the last 2 years. So, not exactly a grain of salt, but it's just going to be very interesting if Melbourne can back it up in the next 4 weeks and just prove that this forward line is capable of kicking a score. But they got the job done now, and they're only one win outside of the top 2. So Melbourne can definitely poise themselves to the end of the season. The one thing that Melbourne have against a lot of teams, I think they've probably got the best lineup of defenders in the comp. So, defense can pretty much wins premierships the majority every single year. So if they can build build upon this like next 4 weeks, pushing to finals, they could very well be the team to beat. If they could very well be the competitor to Collingwood at this stage. But we get to the votes now. 3 votes went to Harry Petty, 2 votes to Max Gawn, and the 1 vote to Christian Petrarca. Petty with the 6 goals. I don't think anyone would have seen this coming, him kicking 6, but he was the match winner for them in the end. Petty kicked 6 goals, and maybe now they've finally found a forward who they can go to. Ben Brown hasn't worked. Brodie Grundy didn't even play in the forward line today. I think he played ruck in the VFL. So maybe Harry Petty's the man. It'd be very interesting to see how he goes in the next couple more weeks, if he can back it up again. Max Gawn was massive in this game. He was very close to getting my 3 votes, but I just gave it to Harry Petty because he kicked 6 goals. I think it's very hard to not give someone the votes when he gets 6. And the 1 vote to Christian Petrarca, massive again. Playing a little bit of forward line, but not as much as the last few weeks. He needs to find a way to kick straighter though. 1 goal 3. He's had a few times this year where he hasn't kicked straight. Considering the team kicked 20 goal 10, he kicks 4 goals. That just gives them a little bit more of a percentage boost as well. Not that that really matters with Brisbane at this stage. I don't know if they can beat Brisbane's percentage. But yeah, I think that's very interesting that Melbourne may have found the way to find a key forward now. Because Tom McDonald really hasn't taken it either. So hopefully for Melbourne's sake, they can use Harry Petty and he can get them over the line. And finally, we get to the game of the round. West Coast versus North Melbourne. And West Coast did it. I said last week that North Melbourne fans get excited because you're going to get your first win since, round 4. And I was wrong. In saying that, though, they didn't kick a goal in the third quarter and they almost stole this one from West Coast. West Coast did everything they could to lose it in the last quarter. I don't even know. I think they scored 1 behind in this last quarter. And this just shows that these two teams are so far off the pace from the rest of the AFL. Even Hawthorn. And Hawthorn have gutted a lot of their experienced players last year, and it seemed to have worked. However, if you look on paper, West Coast should be winning this game. They had a better forward line. They had a lot of experienced defenders as well. They should really be winning this game on paper. But the way they've played this year, having multiple games over 60, 70-point losses, and obviously having those massive 100-point losses as well, to be fair, I don't think West Coast, I didn't expect them to win this game. But at home, maybe I should have. In North Melbourne, that is embarrassing. Brett Ratton, after the game, looked embarrassed. The players looked embarrassed. And I wouldn't be surprised if a couple of heads start to roll at North Melbourne this year. And players may want to ask to leave. Because if you looked at their body language after this game, they knew. And, players aren't stupid. They would know that West Coast have been the bottom of the barrel team this year. They've been the worst team in 20, 30 years with a percentage and all that sort of stuff. They know how embarrassing that loss is, North. And they didn't win it. And I don't know. I think many players could look to leave. Players like Luke Davies-Uniacke look so disappointed after that game when, he arguably nearly got him over the line. He's one of the few players on their list who is genuinely an A-grader. I don't think there's anyone else on that list right now who's an A-grade player. Maybe you could say Harry Sheezel, but what does that say to the list if Harry Sheezel, a player who's played, 20 games, is maybe an A-grader in your side and no one else can be claimed as that? That is embarrassing for North that they have lost, that even though it's away from home, to lose against a club like the West Coast Eagles, who have been so poor this year, is honestly embarrassing. So I think they should be ashamed of themselves. However, when we get to the votes, one player who can keep his head up high is Luke Davies-Uniacke. I gave him the 3 votes. He was brilliant in this game and nearly got him over the line in the end. 2 votes to Jamie Cripps and the 1 vote to Jaden Hunt. I'm not going to spend too much more time on this game because, let's be real, it's not anyone's going to write home about. Maybe a couple of West Coast fans will be happy tonight, and we'll go to work throughout the week and be a little bit happier, but you've still had a pretty shocking year, and I don't think it's going to get any better. You got Essendon next week. I think, for the love of God, Essendon are going to back it up and get a big win, especially playing in Victoria. So we'll see how that one goes. That is the review for round 20. But now, of course, we get to the tips for round 21 with 4 rounds to go, and this is when it starts to get really, really close because basically any team from 13 to 5th finals contenders right now. It's really interesting. It's getting so close, and it's probably one of the more exciting finishes to a season we have seen in a very, very long time. So it'll be very interesting to see who makes the finals from here, and this round arguably could be deciding who doesn't make it. This could really eliminate a couple of clubs out of the conversation. So we start on Friday night with the Bulldogs up against the Tigers. Massive game for both teams. Whoever loses this game, I think, probably misses the finals at this point. If you win this game, you got a chance. That's just all I'm going to say about that. The Bulldogs choked again against the Giants. They've done this many times this year where they've conceded big amounts of goals when they've had leads. And we've also seen as well, like I've said, they've choked and, not choked, but they've given up many parts of games where they've just conceded so many goals without being able to reply. But I do think they get a win here against the Tigers. Only because, one, this is at Marvel, and two, the Bulldogs are definitely known for being a response team. And they're going to get a lot of scrutiny this week. Luke Beveridge will get a lot of scrutiny. He'll make a bunch of changes like he always does. I think they'll get a bounce back against the Tigers, and they'll get a little bit of a reprieve for a week. Still don't know if they're going to make the finals though, even if they win this game. But at this stage, I think this game will decide who makes the finals if these two clubs have a chance. After that, we get a Saturday afternoon, Essendon versus West Coast. Like I said a moment ago, West Coast, they're not going to back this up. I'm sorry. This is at Marvel Stadium. Essendon, even though they've had a very poor couple of weeks, I think they showed signs late in that second half against the Swans that they're definitely a better side than, just like 11th or 12th or even 13th, I think they are. 12th, I think they are now. So I think they're better than that, Essendon. I think they'll know that. I think Brad Scott will get around them this week. Zach Merritt was also very good again, led from the front. And I think they'll bounce back really hard in this game. And I think this is a real chance for Essendon to boost that percentage a little bit and maybe get close to a team like the Bulldogs or the Saints as they push towards maybe a finals berth. After that, we get to Adelaide versus Gold Coast on Saturday afternoon as well. Because this is at Adelaide Oval, I think it's a pretty routine pick here, and I think the Crows will win. The Gold Coast got a great win against the Lions this week, but I don't think they'll back it up at Adelaide Oval. I think they've only won there. I don't think they've ever won at Adelaide Oval. So for them to go there and win against the Crows, who are, I think, better at the Adelaide Oval than Port Adelaide, is going to be a feat too far for them. The Crows will win this game and will keep their finals hopes alive, but I think a lot of results are going to have to go their way for them to make finals now. It's going to be very interesting for the Crows. They've got a very good percentage, which is on their side. However, the teams that have drawn are in that point as well. So maybe the percentage won't be enough if teams have 2 points on them. After that, we get to a Saturday twilight game, Hawthorn versus Collingwood. I will be interested to see how Hawthorn go here, because these two teams can play some close matches. But I think it's pretty easy to say that the MCG, big crowd for Collingwood will be there. They'll back up after the disappointment against Carlton. They'll back up. I think Collingwood, they definitely will I'm pretty sure they'll drop Mason Cox. We saw how pretty disappointed he was on the bench. And I'm not exactly a huge Mason Cox fan, but I didn't really see a massive issue on him looking down when, he's pretty disappointed when he got subbed out. I think when any player gets subbed out, to be fair, I think it's a good thing that they look disappointed. They want to be out there and helping their team. So I don't really have an issue with that, but I do think that Mason Cox in the last month or 5 weeks, he's only kicked 2 goals. So even though he plays a little bit of ruck time, I don't think that's going to matter. He'll get dropped back to the VFL, hopefully find some form for his sake, and we'll see how they go. I don't really give Hawthorn a chance here. I think Collingwood win this one pretty comfortably. After that, we get to the game of the round, GMHBA Stadium, Geelong versus Port Adelaide. I think Geelong will win this one because it's down at GMHBA Stadium. If this is at the MCG, I'd give Port Adelaide a lot more of a chance. If this is at Adelaide Oval, Port Adelaide win this one pretty well. But Port Adelaide have fallen into a big hole now, and I can't remember the last time a team in the top 4 has lost 4 in a row. So this will be very interesting to see if Port Adelaide do lose this game as well. But from where they were a month ago, Port Adelaide have fallen nearly off the face of the earth. And I mean, they've been saying that St Kilda are in free fall. I don't exactly think Port Adelaide are in free fall right now. But if they lose this one and then lose to the Giants, 5 losses in a row from a team that's in the top 4, that's a massive drop-off from a team that won 13 games in a row. And questions will be asked. Like, Ken Hinkley still hasn't signed yet. I don't think this is going to really hamper his choices. But I'm sure there are a few people thinking now, is Ken Hinkley the guy? They've lost 3 games in a row now. Their premiership credentials have really dropped off. So I don't know about Port Adelaide. It'll be very interesting here. If Port can win this game, though, I think wipe everything I just said, everything is fine for Port. For them to break the drought down in Geelong would be massive for them and for their confidence going into the final month of the season. But at this stage, Port Adelaide are very shaky, and I've lost a lot of trust for them in the past few weeks, especially. After that, we get to the Sydney Smash. Don't ever call it that. That is so embarrassing. But anyway, Giants versus Sydney. This is arguably one of the biggest ones we've seen, because obviously we had that one in the finals. That's probably the biggest. Well, the biggest when they first played back in Sydney, I think in 2016, and obviously the one down in Tassie in 2021. So this is a pretty big one because this decides if the Swans are still in the race. And if the Swans can jag this game, I think they have a big chance. But the Giants are just so good. They are so good. They have 7 wins on the trot. Buddy Franklin will be out, so they don't have that Sam Taylor to go to him. So he's going to go to one of the younger guys in Marty, probably. Maybe Logan McDonald, but I think it'll probably be Marty. I think the Giants win the 8th in a row now. They look very hard to beat. And if Dane Rampy's out, I don't know who's going to go to Toby Green. Because I think Harry Cunningham's probably too small for Toby Green. And I think someone like maybe Tom McCartan's probably too big. So at this stage, I'm going to be picking the Giants in that one as well, and I think that will finally be the killer blow to the Swans' finals hopes. Next up, we get to Sunday. First game is North Melbourne versus Melbourne, and this is down in Tasmania, so this does give North Melbourne a bit of a chance. But if they lose to West Coast, they're not beating Melbourne. That's just a pretty safe bet. Melbourne, I think, have finally hit a good run of form. They've finally found, I think, a forward combination that works. And North Melbourne can't stop this, I don't think. I think now it's going to be pretty hard for North to... it's going to be hard for Alistair Clarkson to come back to this job. I think it's in the next couple of weeks if he comes back. I think he should just wait the season out, just regroup and then start again. Because this is not good for North. They're going to get beaten here. I think North will stay with them till about half-time, but eventually Melbourne will just run over the top of them. And this is going to be a tough month for North going into the end of this season. After that, we get to St Kilda versus Carlton. Massive game on paper, but a lot of this game hasn't really been. I don't know if it'll be talked about much this week because St Kilda aren't really in the best of form right now. I think everyone's pretty well on the same page that Carlton are heavy favourites, and they'll probably just go in and smash St Kilda. And I'm pretty much in that boat as well. St Kilda do have a good defence though, so if Carlton just bomb it on Charlie's head, I think the Saints have a chance. But the way Carlton have been playing in the past 7 weeks, I think they just found a different way to get to Charlie Curnow, and the young forwards, the small forwards around him are actually performing quite well. And Jack Martin was actually brilliant on the weekend as well, especially in the first half. So at this stage, I'm giving Carlton this win pretty easily in the end. And I think St Kilda will continue now to free fall out of the 8 because their last month isn't as easy as the last few weeks they've had North and Hawthorn, and they've only won the last 3 games against the bottom side. So I just don't think St Kilda can back this up anymore, and I think now they're going to fall out of the 8. And finally, we get to Sunday afternoon, and by God, has this game turned into a bit of a 50-50 almost. Fremantle versus Brisbane at home. The thing is, though, Freo have not been very good at home this year. They've only won 4 of, I think, their 9. So I don't remember the last time Fremantle have had that sort of performance. Probably since they were right down the bottom. So this is going to be a very interesting game for Freo. I think they want to finish their season off pretty strong. I think that they'll have a pretty good performance here, but I just think the Lions will bounce back after that performance against the Gold Coast. They were very, very poor against the Suns. I think if someone goes to Lachie Neale, Brisbane have to, stand up for him. I don't think they did that enough in the Q Clash. I think they'll do that a lot more. I think Brisbane are very good at doing that, but we'll have to wait and see because the Lions, this is a big game for them, and if they don't, I think if they win this game, they take that top 2 spot back, and it's going to be very hard to take it off of them. So the Lions have to go into this game and win this one, and I think they win the top 2 spot over Port Adelaide towards the end of the year because they have a pretty good run home, the Lions. But guys, that is the tips for this week. So finally, we get to the fantasy portion of the podcast, and pretty good week for me this week. I got 2,415. Had my captain on Marcus Bontempelli, which really shot my score in the end. I only got 86, so 172. Dacos was my vice. I should have just waited. I should have just left it on Marcus Bontempelli and then waited for Saturday night to put on my captain because Dawson did brilliantly. A lot of the Giants players that I had did brilliantly too. Even Dunkley on Saturday afternoon. I had a lot of other choices, but I put on Bontempelli, and I think that's a pretty fair choice. He's been brilliant this year, but just couldn't back it up on Saturday afternoon. He had a pretty good first half, but just petered off towards the end, and I think that's when the Bulldogs kind of went down as well. So a little bit unlucky there. Sam Flanders, who I brought in last week, was brilliant. Scored 100. He's been good. He looks like he'll stay pretty much in the team for the rest of the season. Kieran Briggs was good as well with the 130. A little bit frustrating because Tim English got 153, so that was a little bit disappointing. Tim Taranto, kind of interesting. He's kind of really fallen off now, hasn't he? Hasn't only scored 200 out of his past 5, and he scored 77, which is his lowest of the season against the D's. So he's kind of fallen off a bit, young Tim Taranto. And Caleb Daniel, he got 39. What are the Bulldogs doing? They put him in the midfield. He was playing really good footy. He was a great ball user. And now they've just chucked him out of there. He doesn't touch the footy, and now he's just useless. It's no offense. But anyway, my trades will be this week. I'm going to get rid of Jasper Fletcher for a rookie player. I haven't really decided that one yet because the trades aren't up at this stage, so I'll decide that pretty soon. And then I'll get rid of Caleb Daniel for either Sam Doherty or Lockie Whitfield. I'll put it on the screen. You guys will see it now, who my actual trades are. But guys, those are my trades for this week, and that is the end of the Boundary Riders podcast. Sorry I made a couple of mistakes throughout it, but I'm actually a bit tired and I've got to go to work pretty soon now. Make sure to let me know how the channel's going, and also I want to thank everyone as well we hit 100 subscribers, I think on last week sometime. So I really appreciate that. Make sure to let me know how you're feeling about the channel at the moment. There won't be a trade rumours video this week, but we'll probably do that one next week. Obviously, my brother, co-host Jack, he probably won't be able to do many podcasts anymore. Maybe he may be able to if we can get him done on Sundays, but yeah, because he gets to work on Mondays now, he just can't do it on Mondays. And to be fair, I think it's better if we did it done on Sundays because it'll just be easier for us. But yeah, make sure to come and join a live stream as well, guys, when we do it. We usually do 1 game a week, maybe 2. And, I like to commentate the games. You guys have been giving me some really good feedback about that. So, yeah, I really appreciate you guys joining the channel in the past few months. We've been really growing. I think we've grown by like half the subs in the last month or so. So, that's really cool to see. Thanks for watching today's podcast, and we'll catch you all next time.